Today we meet James Wright, CEO of Wrexham Lager. He shares with us how the brand is coping with the Hollywood spotlight and how he is planning to use it for the long-term good of the brand. He explains how having a simple one-page strategy will bring his team together to take the brand back to the four corners of the earth. And finally, he explains the importance of being a leader, not a boss, and always trying to keep things fun. Enjoy. Today we welcome James Wright from Wrexham Lager. Thank you for joining us, James.
No problem.
I think it's always great to start these sessions with giving our listeners some sort of idea of your background, of how you've got here, so they can understand the context by which you've built your career and now what, the successful part of this journey that we're going to talk about today. So if you could just sort of share sort of how you got into this office at whatever time of day it is on a Wednesday afternoon.
Yeah, well, I never planned to be in the drinks industry, but it's one of those industries, once you get in it, it's very hard to get out because it is a lot of fun. I suppose we're selling fun, which I think a lot of us forget. To go back to the beginning, I got into it because I was working down south in London and I wanted to move back up north. Being a northern lad and from Newcastle originally, hence my strong Geordie accent. And I was just trying to find a job and eventually saw a job in the Telegraph for launching a new brand within the UK, wanting somebody to look after Ireland and the north of England, and that was Red Bull. So I started my journey in the drinks industry working for Red Bull, building that brand, before then going to work for the distributor of Red Bull, who had a beer portfolio as well. So at the time I then moved on to selling brands like Sol, Tiger Beer, Pilsner Urquell, Castle Lager for SAB Miller, and building those brands, and was having quite a lot of success with it, and it was building very nicely within the wholesale and within the pub groups. And then one day I got a phone call from a Mexican gentleman saying, I'd like to meet you. I was wondering who the heck was this, and it was somebody from Modelo from Corona. And at the time Corona had an office in Brussels, and they basically looked after Europe, Africa, Middle East, and that area, and they basically wanted to have a conversation with me. So I basically got headhunted to go and work for Modelo, and at the time it was very interesting because I had different distributors in different markets. So in Scandinavia, in the UK, I had Charles Wells Brewery, who at the time had Bombardier and Red Stripe and other brands like that, and Kirin Ichiban and Corona, and then I also had a different distributor in Ireland, Scotland, and some of the other markets, and basically worked on that role for about 4 years. It's where I ended up meeting my wife, because she worked for Charles Wells, and then after 4 years, my wife once turned to me and said to me, I think you need to give up your job because you think you're changing the world over a bottle of beer. I'd say she said it a bit more bluntly than that.
Like wives do.
Like wives do. So handed our notice in, which I think people were going, what? Because we'd grown Corona in the UK, especially from 300,000 cases to over a 4 million case brand. And, it was the trajectory was going really well. So we gave up our jobs and became feral for a year and went backpacking through India, so Nepal and stuff. So as you do. So, which was a real good leveler. It was nice to first year of marriage, so have some great time with my other half. And then this was 2005, and then I came back and I thought, I'll try the other side of the fence. So I got a job working for Walkabout Pubs, being a brand manager for that brand and redoing a rebrand and everything. At the time, they had 52 venues, very big sports venues. It had a very young consumer, especially university, and then also had a consumer in their 40s who were basically men and women who'd got divorced and go, where did I used to go and pick people up? And they'd go to Wetherspoon. So I had these two interesting demographics, and I worked there for a bit, and it was a good lesson for me because it made me really appreciate that how as brands sometimes can be quite arrogant. And once I'd done the deal between Coke and Pepsi and what the big brewers, really it was about clean toilets, customer service, what the menu were offering, and also really understanding the customer journey and the decision corridor and how people actually engage with brand and how we make it that's a commercial offering. And then after that, I did my own little business in in sort of technology before eventually, cut a long story short, did a bit of consulting and then applied for a job at Halewood Wines and Spirits. Originally going for a NAM role, but they wanted me to head up all agency, and at the time they were wanting to start talks with Qingdao Beer. So I joined the business, and within 3 weeks I was on a plane over to China, started looking after Qingdao Beer, brought on Lamb's Navy Rum, which was part of the Pernod portfolio run by Corby in Canada, Marcus de Catheris, brought on Tequila Rose, and so on and so forth. And I had 14 years at Halewood, from running the international team to being sales controller, then marketing controller, before unfortunately John Halewood passed away. Became a bit like a boat without a rudder, and then we put the rudder back on and a new CEO joined, and there was a lot of changes, and the joke was I was like last man standing, and I became acquisition and mergers director. So my role was basically looking about the portfolio expanded, and that's why we went into whiskey. So initially started to set up a business with the Pogues, Streams of Whiskey, then bought West Cork Distillery in Skibbereen, and that started the whiskey journey. And then we looked at the next purchase was Hawkshead Brewery in the beer in the Lake District. At the same time, looking at other brands, so we we looked at Edinburgh Gin and a whole few others before buying in the City of London distillery, gin distillery, and it just kept building like that. And looking at the acquisition and merger piece and where we invested and did that before. Eventually, I started building a business in North Wales for the business, which was Aberfoyle's Whiskey Distillery, which was a good learning curve because I'd never built a whiskey distillery. So I was left to just get on with it and build a visitor centre and all these other things, and really get under the skin of working with the Welsh Government and being the first whiskey distillery in North Wales for over 100 years. Then I also was looking after Willow Water in the Lake District, and then eventually focused very much on the whiskey portfolio, before finishing there, taking a career break, and then doing some consultancy again. And then I got a phone call from Wrexham, and that's why I ended up at Wrexham. And to bring it full circle, I've been very good friends with some of the directors at Wrexham for a long time, and it's a family-run business. The family realised they'd hit a ceiling and didn't know how to progress the business. They were going to do something, and Mark, one of the directors, rang me up one day when I was on holiday, and just said, "We're going to do this." I said, "Please don't do that. You'll take a bath." We had further discussions, and they asked if I'd come on board.
Fab. It's quite a journey. Obviously, we've worked together in the past when you were at Halewood, which was great fun, as you said. Yeah. Building some brands like the Lamb's story, and we all look back very fondly on that. And it is obviously with a health warning, it is a fun industry to be in because we're part of the entertainment, aren't we? And we've got to remember our position within that. So you're at Wrexham Lager now, which has probably been very much accelerated onto the map, not put onto the map, because I think people will be amazed with the history of the brand, which I think it's worth just spending a minute or so on, because I don't think people will realise, they'll all just assume it's become famous because of this crazy TV programme of Rob and Ryan buying Wrexham AFC. But the brand's got what we would dream of in terms of history and provenance for many brown fizzy liquids that get you drunk, as Mr. Midgley would say to us both. So I think maybe just spend a moment on that, because I think, again, that's something I'd like to revisit about what you're trying to leverage now as you grow the brand in today's market.
Well, I mean, Wrexham Lager has been an interesting one. I've been saying to one of the please, can I just do something with your brand for free? Because I said you've got this wealth of history. There's 140 years of history, being the oldest lager brewery in the UK. You go back through the annals. I mean, I have an archivist now, and we're finding so many wonderful nuggets. I mean, recently we found a newspaper article in 1892, talking about Wrexham Lager being shipped to Australia and then having a beer tasting against all the German pilsners and actually winning. So, we have this wonderful footprint where it travelled the globe, to places like Sudan, to basically where the empire was, South Africa, Australia, and so forth, and the most unusual places it turns up. Even a letter from Khartoum talking about Wrexham Lager. We have some of this really bizarre stuff. I mean, when it was starting to be brewed in the north, obviously it didn't do very well up north because, a lot of the palate was very much still around bitter. So where it really got traction about 100 years ago was more in London. So it became a staple in Harrods, the Savoy, and a lot of the gentlemen's clubs as well. So that's where it seemed to have its reach, which obviously affected a lot of businesses. And then the brand was owned by Carlsberg. Carlsberg, I mean, Wrexham used to have over 42 breweries because the water's very soft here. But then, like with consolidation of all the big breweries and all that sort of stuff, they wound down a lot of businesses, and Wrexham Lager was no more by the 2000s. Local MP who used to work for Wrexham Lager basically bought the rights to the brand and sold them to the Roberts family, who basically live and work and have businesses in Wrexham for the last 100 years, basically for £1. And what was interesting is the family basically found a lot of the old brewers and stuff who used to work at Wrexham, found the original recipes, and they built this wonderful brew house in the centre of Wrexham. It's very compact but very well designed, with some very sort of people who've got a lot of experience, because for some reason everybody seems to have a connection with Wrexham. So it seems to be the most connected place I've ever come across in the world. So the family built that, and then they've gradually been building the business over time. Obviously, COVID had an impact on it, and then coming out of COVID, then building that. At the same time, what's happened is you have had this reinsurgence in the town because of Rob McAvenny and Ryan Reynolds buying the football club. What this has done, and one of their key drivers, is very much about building community, and they've got a very key vision of how they want to build this club over time. And then they had, on top of that, the Welcome to Wrexham series. What that did is it created a awareness of brand Wrexham globally, with over 164 million viewers watching Disney Plus and the show. It's obviously an Emmy award-winning show as well, reaching far and flung. So big consumers of that show being Australia, Scandinavia, and North America. And it was only recently I was talking to one of the key Premiership clubs, one of the directors there, and we're talking about the most recognised football clubs in America, and number 2 is Wrexham AFC. Number 1 is Richmond AFC, which is not even a real club. The Ted Lasso
they made
series.
up for, yeah.
Yeah. So it just shows the power of media and how that works. But what that does for Wrexham Lager is it creates an awareness without the actual distribution. So it was basically coming into a business where I had high awareness, especially internationally, but with not the right infrastructure and basically the processes that needed to be put in place, to build brand.
It is, and like you say, there are you get legs up in life, and that's one of them. I think, obviously, the fact that you probably spend quite a bit of money sponsoring that main stand has paid back dividends there, because it seems to be featured in every still of the show, doesn't it? Which is wonderful. But
yeah, I mean, well, the Wrexham Lager has been sponsoring the football club for many years. Back in the 70s and 80s, we sponsored the shirt. So it wasn't something that happened just because Hollywood came to town. There's been a long association with the lager and the football club, and it just happened that we were able to obviously get the naming rights for the stand. Obviously, as they move up divisions, the price tag will change, and it has to in the infrastructure. And in a way, I suppose they're almost the football club, and even the Wrexham Lager were trying to build planes whilst flying them. So because with moving up, winning 2 leagues back to back, and being very successful already this season within if they move up a 3rd time, I mean, the story around that will be,
it's becoming
fantastic.
Fairy tale, isn't it? Yeah,
it is
fairy tale. Yeah.
However, with all these great things, it's how back of house follows and resourcing, and in a way they're going from if it goes up another division, it's how do they cope with Lamborghinis and Ferraris coming into the car park. So it's all those sort of things.
Be a nice problem, but yeah, I see what you mean. So it's interesting. Obviously, it's like you say, it's still 100% family owned by the Roberts family.
Yes.
You've obviously had connections with them over the past. What do you think they saw in you and your skill set that they felt potentially that was missing in theirs, because they'd obviously bought the business and done the hard bit of reinstating it, getting the brewing side going. So what have they come for you? Because I think it's interesting for people to know that businesses need different skills as they grow, don't they? You've got your entrepreneurial kickoff, but then you need someone to bring structure to take it to the next stage.
I think, I mean, like I say, well, one of the directors has known me for about 7 years. I also sit on the food and drink board for Wales, so I've always been supporting a lot of businesses and looking at how to build. But I've always been there helping them as well with if they needed equipment or stuff. I've advised, sometimes just being very transparent and open. You know, I'm a great believer in a helping hand, and obviously the stuff I was doing at Aberfoyles when I was building the whiskey distillery and building that brand, they would have been very privy to that, because in Wales, one thing we have here is a cluster system, which works brilliantly where business, we have a spirit cluster, we have a beer cluster, we have an entrepreneur cluster, CEO sustainable cluster. The only other country that does it probably just as well would be New Zealand, but you know, the Welsh government really gets behind the food and drink over here, and that's including the show. So there's quite a lot of transparency, and I've always, been very heavily involved in giving talks about, best practice. When I say best practice, whatever that means to everybody, but saying the way I've gone about it, and if people can take bits out of that helps their business, then great. One thing I've always been very lucky is I've had a lot of touch points. So the fact that I've had 20 years experience in an international, as well as building brand and doing marketing as well as sales, but I'm still a core salesperson. And it's, I suppose, having that bandwidth to be able to do that. But and hopefully just listening and trying to work out that problem. I love trying to resolve a strategic issue and how you actually create a clear strategy behind a brand.
And you talked about they came to you with an idea and you very politely said, "No, guys, don't do that." How are they good? Are they good at listening? Do they know where their strengths lie and where yours do, and how that is a good partnership?
Yeah, what basically everyone's got their own roles, but with me coming on board, what they've been, it's been very humbling. They've given, the family have shown me a lot of trust and given me, pretty much autonomy on running the business, and that's been very useful instead of having to go through lots of hoops and all that sort of stuff. And it's also from day one, I had a very clear strategy and a clear, route that we needed to go. It was creating a very core pillars. So, for all this history, I had all these assets, but nobody knows about it. We had all these wonderful awards where we've even won Best in Show in Germany against Pilsners, but nobody knows. So, we have a liquid that's, one thing that makes Wrexham Lager quite unique is we lager for over 4 to 6 weeks. A lot of our competitors put chemicals in to speed that process up. But the one thing that the family will not do is let it go out the door if we haven't got something that we drink ourselves. So it's very much about that quality piece and consistency, because the biggest challenge with, especially in the brewing and drink and distilling industry, is complacency in my book. So as long as we keep reviewing everything and making sure we stand to our values, that's really key. However, sometimes it's really understanding those values. And I always have this really quite interesting stress test where can you put on one page what your vision is, what your customer outtake needs to be, what your core brand values are, all those things. If you can get it into a page, then that makes it tight. It sounds easy, but it's not. No. So what we looked at is basically going, right, what do we need to do with this brand? So the first pillar was very much, I had to look at the portfolio, had to look at the branding, had to look about hierarchy, creating the right brand assets to make sure that could stand up across different territories, and it also kept the core brand feel. Okay, so we developed all that, and then we looked at the SKU mix, so understanding what sort of packaging, what sort of pack size we required to go into different markets and what that works. So really, in the UK, what sort of pack format do we need from retailers versus entrees, versus if we're going into another market international. On top of that, then it was very much looking at the back of house. So one thing I've had to do, as you can imagine with the family business, is hard reset the whole business and put in processes and learnings that fundamentally mean that we won't fall over down the line in building that brand. Excuse me. So around that, we looked at production. I then looked at the processes in place and making sure we put in the right sort of SOPs, so standard operating procedures, making sure that we were basically putting in the right processes, so we were compliant for HMRC, for health and safety, all those elements that sometimes can be overlooked, and then creating a platform, communication platform with internally in the business, so people had, were empowered. So that's whether it was toolbox talks with the shop floor, whether that was weekly production meetings, sales meetings, and making sure that there was cross pollination across all the different teams within the business. I think too many businesses sometimes forget the importance of communication within. And like I always say, we're not creating nuclear atoms, we're creating liquid in a bottle. And the people that make it complicated is us. And God, we always make it complicated. So I think for me, it was very much about getting all those processes in place, right from warehousing, having the right licenses in place, and also looking at the legality. So one of the things I had to do was very much quickly establish all our IPs and make sure we had everything in place, whether that was for UK, Europe, Madrid Protocol, going further afield, and all that. So it's because so many businesses don't do the due diligence on some of their legalities and making sure that their brands are protected in the right way. And sometimes that's where the value of your brand is. So
is that especially important as you look to export across the world now? I know you've got some.
Yes, it's important, but also it's vital in the whole journey of building brand. If you can't protect your brand and people then can copy it and do what they want with it, then you haven't got a brand, and then you become trapped in certain zones. So it's sometimes having that foresight and really thinking what's not just happening in front of you, but what's going to happen in year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, and so on and so forth. Some businesses say, well, it's really hard to see what's down the line, but I always say you should always try and have a clear roadmap for at least 3 years in sales and marketing, and how that and what the challenges could be. Now that could change. Got to be flexible, but hey, as long as you have a viewpoint and you're prepared to make mistakes and go, right, I made a mistake. How do I make that happen? Then how you change it.
Yeah,
I'm not a great believer in pointing fingers. What's really important to me is very much going, right, we have an issue here. How do we resolve it and get on with it? And if people make a mistake, right, you made a mistake, you won't do it again, will you? Because then you explain that mistake. Hence the reason why we have this toolbox talk once a week, which, funny enough, eradicates it and then becomes managing within the team. And it's the same with doing SOPs. You get the team to obviously quarterly review them and rewrite them. So they go, it needs to tweak here, and then they own it, and it becomes second nature.
Brilliant. And just go back to that plan on the page, because it's something we use here actually, and the ability, like you say, it's not easy to do, but once you have, is everybody in the business aware of that? Is everybody aware of the sort of strategic direction and the ambition of the Wrexham Lager brand?
Yeah, so what I do is I make sure I pull, I'll come in early mornings and I do it before the day starts and give an overview. If there's some big news, it goes on the notice board, but also I will then communicate it verbally, and I'll ask, are you aware of what we're doing, and all that, to make sure that everybody's, we're not a massive team at the moment, but it's really important to make sure that people are fully aware, and we're also actually all singing off the same song sheet. I think a lot of businesses where they sometimes struggle is, if you ask the same question to 5 different people in different departments, will they be saying the same thing?
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, no. Now you've got to that's why it's so important to keep your messaging very clear and simple and not complicated, because at the end of the day, you've got to think, well, if it's not transpiring within your own organisation, what's the chance of that really working out of the organisation? So it's just making sure that you've got those sort of simple steps in place. And I think especially when you as a senior manager and stuff, it's sometimes trying to extrapolate what's in here out, because sometimes you forget what you know, and it's trying to always make sure that you're being conscious competent rather than unconscious competent, because just because you think you've done it before and it becomes natural to you, it's how do you bring those the other people on board with it. It depends on your leadership style. Are you a boss or a leader? In my book, I like to empower people and feel people own it, because I tend to get more out of my staff from doing that. And at the end of the day, I'm very interested in seeing how they actually enjoy their journey. It has to be fun. If it's not fun, then don't do it. A lot of the time I say to people, this is not a job, it's a project. And the reason why I say that, if you get a job, it gives you the mentality, oh, I've got my job, or, what parameters I've got to work. If it's a project, right, what are you wanting to get from this role to actually progress you into this or that, or what do you want to, where your gaps are? And I find that empowers people a lot more, and it's a lot easier. And it makes it easier for me as well.
Yeah, well, otherwise you end up doing everything, don't you? And you need people to help you carry the weight of the load as you try.
You certainly do. And I think that one of the big challenges, I think, in society at the moment is people don't want to put the head above the parapet. People don't want to take ownership. They don't want to make decisions. And I don't think that's unfair, me saying that. And that's not because I've got to a certain age and now I'm becoming cantankerous and I say stuff because, I am like my father now. Not at all. But I think
but we are.
Maybe a little bit of that. But I think it's not like the old days. And the fact that my children say that I'm ancient is never great. But I think it's I always say treat people how you expect to be treated yourself. On the way up, you always need them on the way down. So and what's really important in this role when I've come onto it is that I've wanted to bring people on board who want to have fun, who, I'll be honest, have not got an ego. We all go through a stage in our life where we have an ego at some point, and it's very liberating when you realise you can lose that and you can work a different way. But again, that's maybe an age thing.
It comes with a bit of reflection, doesn't it? You realise what you need.
So.
Yeah. But
so that was the internal bit. Then obviously looking at production. So we're looking to build a new brewery. So starting that process and working very much with the town and the council and the government. Because what's very important, if we're going to build a new brewery, how do we create a circular economy? How do we use local businesses? So like my can is Ardar, which is on the Wrexham industrial estate. Packaging, my label company I use is on the industrial estate. So trying to use as many businesses locally as possible to create that sort of hub. And then at the same time, if we're going to build this new brewery, what does it look like on a sustainability piece? And before we start going down that buzzword, that's not just about carbon footprint, it's about your staff, it's about your innovation, about all those other elements.
That whole CSR piece rather than just the one element of it,
And for me, what links it all together again is your team. It's always the team in the middle and how you invest in resource in it. But at the same time, it's creating this platform that not just has a production capability, but also has a tourism piece that actually creates a customer. It comes back to what I was talking about in Walkabout, that customer journey piece, what that messaging is, which are the businesses, how the customer journey is around the town. So I have a community officer that works for the company that it's new role I've developed, and their role is to do localized social media. We have the F Jones initiative where we highlight local heroes within the business. Local heroes within in the community.
Yeah.
And it's about giving back, but it's also just creating that sort of ambassadorial piece as well. It's creating that subconscious feeling around the brand before we even get onto the other pillars that I've got, which is like around sales and investments and all that.
I think, it sounds like, and I think this is good because it's always nice to pass on to people that are listening who maybe haven't got the experience of how you do bring a structure into a business without getting too heavy in this podcast. But the idea of having the focus in that strategic pillar approach is really healthy because there's a lot to remember, isn't there, in running a business? And suddenly if you've got sort of bits to go back to and refer to all the time, it just helps, doesn't it, keep that process moving forward?
Yeah, and I think it's also having a very clear understanding of what you're trying to do. You've got to understand your environmental issues. You understand, that's everything from law to pricing to competitor set to all those. Then having what you want your vision to be. And our vision is very clear, which is we want to bring the brand back to the four corners of the world where we used to be. Then from that, it really then creates your sort of strategy, sort of your business plan and your action plan. So. But like with everything, I always say, it's very good to have what's your objective, strategically what you're trying to do, and people always get strategy and tactics mixed up. Tactically, what you're trying to do, and the most important thing out of all of that is why. Why am I doing that? What's the point? And then from that, you can then look at how you need to resource your strategy elements. So the next stage for me was then, right, what people do I need to bring, overhead do I need to bring in the business to actually develop it in the right way? Because I don't have multiple arms, and I've got to learn not to take everything on. Something checking yourself. So I've been very lucky that I've been able to bring in a mixture of freelancers and full-time staff, people I know. Been in the industry a long time, so the old saying is not what you know, it's who you know is very true. So I've been very lucky to bring a fantastic team on board. And coming back to the ego piece, it was very rare to sit around the table with all salespeople and there was no ego around it, because yet again, it's bringing on the people that that will do a job and have that right balance. And I'm very fortunate that I'm in that position that I can actually pick and choose, which has been great. But also I think the people that come on board know the way I work and tend to be very collaborative and open about it. I'm not one person go, look at me, I that's all my idea. I'm very rarely right, so it's better to share the love. So we bring the sales team on, understanding what role we need to do within the domestic market. The challenge we have is we're a regional brand. How do we become a national brand? And you've got to be very careful to dial down the Welshness, because we don't want to be locked into it being a regionality. So that's why the strapline changes to the oldest UK brewery, and really started the education piece. Hence the archive person coming on and make sure you got the right roles. Sometimes you get it wrong, but as long as you understand that you have to change it, don't be scared to say no. And then building that plan, and sometimes just being cheeky and being asked the question if it feels right, instead of actually going through data and all that. If it feels that right, have a go. What have you got to lose? But at the same time,
you'd be amazed how many times that has come up in the podcasts we've recorded so far. In terms of that, I've coined it as trusting your gut, but I suppose it's not. It's a collection of all of your history, and then applying it. And I think one of the key things that a lot of people have said is it's about making a decision and seeing how it plays, rather than being paralyzed and not making decisions, so that you naturally self-fulfill and fail.
And what's the worst that's going to happen? It's like when I redesigned the can and the label with Mike, who I've worked with for 25 years from another agency, and we did it by sitting in a boardroom with some of the designers and saying, right, move that to there, do that, let's put that colour in and all that. And it felt so alien, because in the past we've done it, you have to do your quant and qual and do, months of research and work out your hierarchy and where it sits. And I can remember turning to Mike and go, it looks really good, but it feels so wrong. And you go, what do you mean it feels so wrong? He said, it looks brilliant. And I'm going, yeah, but we haven't done any work. He goes, but
what have we missed?
Yeah, what we've missed. There must be something wrong here. And it's like going, but we've done it for so long, you sometimes forget, what you're doing. But it's sometimes having that confidence. And I think, anyone that says, the talk about imposter syndrome or all that sort of stuff, we all go through that stage and go, really, do I know that? Sometimes I'll meet my old colleagues from when we first started Red Bull and go, what's the difference now? Oh, we can tell people to go and get us a coffee rather than us having to go and get one. But, we still feel, I still feel like I'm 18 sometimes. I keep being told by my family, I have a very ad-fab relationship with my daughters, so it's just like I've got to realise my age.
I'd love to see that. Fabulous.
But I think it's I think yet again it just comes back to, like I was saying, just sometimes actually if it feels right, do it. And I think we get so caught up in going, but that's not a process, and that's not, well, as a country we've always been quite entrepreneurial. We've got to sometimes just push the boundaries a bit. We're too safe these days, and it comes back to that translates and cascades down to your sales force, your marketeers, you got to, if you can show that sort of willingness to share ideas, even to the point, and you'll know this when we worked on lambs together and stuff. Sometimes some people would say, "Oh, we shouldn't do that." I totally disagree with it, but if you feel strong enough about it, let's do it. Just because I don't believe it doesn't mean it's wrong. So, and it's sometimes being able to do that.
And that's it, isn't it? And it is listening to others, because you haven't always got the answer, have you? And it's about bringing that team together that will, you will challenge the Roberts family with some of their preconceptions of when they took this business over. They've now got to behave in a different way to take it to the next level.
Yeah, and every business has a challenge. I mean, with a family business, the main challenge is cultural change. It's putting stuff in place that no, you can't do that, and it's in a way it's losing that control. Where well, I wanted to do that, so I can do that. No, you can't do that because the impact is this, and this. What you're
Yeah.
not understanding is the impacts down the line and the bigger piece. So that's been an interesting journey going through that, and yet again, that's having regular shareholder meetings, board meetings, keeping very I speak to most of the directors on a daily basis to say this is happening because this is what we're doing, so they understand, and they also feel like they're being brought on the journey because you do
Yeah.
not want to alienate
Well,
people
that's
at
it.
the end of
Yeah.
the day.
Then they
So
become part of the success as well, don't they? And I think
yeah,
that's important to bring everybody along.
and
How
and
have
and
you?
that
Sorry, James. Go on. Carry on.
so and then it's just basically from that you can then look at, right, what does my roadmap need to be, whether it's sales within the UK, sales internationally, and then how do you switch it on and build the brand accordingly.
Yeah. I suppose. Sorry. My next question is like it's related to all of that, where you your world in terms of the alcohol world is very, very competitive. It's besieged at the moment with, say, fashionable brands coming along that maybe don't have the resonance that a brand such as Wrexham Lager. How are you dealing with the temptation just to go, brilliant, let's jump on the coattails of this crazy media circuit that's going on in the town, sell the lager for the name of Wrexham, not for the 140 years of history, because we do know that program will unfortunately wane at some stage, and you need to be left with something that you've got proper leverage in.
Well, it's understanding how the consumer engages it, but at the end of the day, I think at the very beginning I said this is about building brand. This isn't about shifting kegs of beer or packaged beer. This is about building brand for longevity that's a sustainable model. So the Hollywood factor, yeah, it gives you the bit of the jazz hands and that wonderful,
I assume you've
but
got Ryan on speed dial now, as he's buying your beer.
yeah. I was just telling you that I was busy with this podcast,
Yeah,
so he had to
exactly.
wait.
Yeah.
So not a
Yeah.
problem. So, but yes, I have met them and done that because at the end of the day, they're very keen about building that community and all that. And there's, where we've got an interesting thing with the football club and us, we've both got a Wrexham brand, and we're own standalone brands. But there is where areas where we can cross over in different
Yeah.
markets. Probably more internationally than in the UK because we're probably a bit more partisan in the UK because it's a football club. But fundamentally, we are, have our own history or our brand in our own right. We do not need to be going, the brand will only work with what's happening there. Does it help create awareness? Yes. Does it
Yeah.
help create engagement in the brand? Yes. We'd be foolish not to capitalize on that. Okay, and there's nothing wrong with that. We have these opportunities, but at the same time, I have this wonderful brand that has a quality liquid, and the way, as I always say, people buy with these, but they repurchase with this, and that's really, really important. But on top of that, we have this fantastic history and stuff where we can really capitalize on it. So I'll give you an example. I've just launched nationally in Australia. So fantastic. Got a listing with Dan Murphy's, which is part of Endeavour Group, used to be Woolworths. Have 44% of the market share over there. It's more of a duopoly with Coles. Okay, and we're in talks with Coles as well. So growing really well. Why? Because we thought, it must be because of the awareness of the show, and all that. But talking to the buyer at Dan Murphy's, knew nothing about the show, knew nothing about the football, but knew about us being on the Titanic.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Yeah.
we want a bit of the history, which I didn't say earlier on.
I can say we forgot about that. That was a big headline we forgot all about.
Yeah, we were on the White Star Liners, which one of their boats was the Titanic. So we've even got the menus and all that sort of stuff that show that. So, so that helped. But then the other buyer at Coles knew the show. So in a way, I've got this double bubble where I can get literally people know about the history and interested in that. But then some people go, I like the football, and that opens up the conversation. And then you start talking about all the other stuff, and people go, oh, wow, didn't know about that, or we got that reach, or wow, didn't know about the history. So that's why we stand alone. So it's basically, it's using the springboard in the right way. And my really cheddar analogy I always use, and I used this once with a government agency when they wanted me to do something in Tokyo years ago with a brand, going, it's a fantastic springboard, but my Speedos are dry. And they're like looking at me going, what planet are you on? What? Not only we're trying to not imagine you in Speedos, but it's the fact that you're actually saying they're dry. And what I'm meaning is, well, the swimming pool's got no water in to swim in afterwards. So what's the point of the springboard? So it's really about making sure that the pool is full of water. And for me, it's very much about creating that sustainable brand model that stands alone, but can dial up and dial down some of the environmental things that are happening around it to leverage that, but literally be able to get my 20 lengths in a day. So
in your Speedos, well, again,
my Speedos, yes.
ingrained now.
And just on that fact, for next summer we do have a Speedo line coming out with Wrexham Lager across the backside. So it's all planned.
I'm there.
Campaign, but so yeah, there is scope with that, but also I'm talking with the club about how we maximise our sponsorship with them and how they can utilise us, because it makes sense to cross-pollinate and use each other's resources. Why wouldn't you? And it comes back to partnerships again.
Yeah. And it's great if it sounds like certainly, the region and Wrexham itself is being built out on that, which is really smart and taking us back to how business should be done, isn't it? That everybody can win if you work together.
Yeah, it is, and it's also then going right. How do you utilise that? So the football club gives us a good reach within North America. So we're about to launch in Canada in literally a couple of weeks. We're actually got Keg over there now, and then we're launching in one of the major retailers across 21 states in the US in December. But with all that, you have to invest in the right way. I've got a team on the ground over there that I've worked with in the past, so it's making sure that we do that due diligence. And a lot of the DTI and stuff, or how you managing to do this, and sometimes it's I'm afraid it's just time on the clock. It's the experience of going into those markets, knowing the right people, and knowing where you can get stung. US normally is a place where brands go to die because they don't invest in the right way. So that comes to my final pillar, which is very much about investment and understanding your cash flow. Brands don't fail because they're not successful. They fail because they're not having any cash. So it's making sure that I work out how that looks, what my cash flow looks like, what my projected P&L is, for quite a few years ahead, and understanding, where the pinch points are going to be.
How much do you? I suppose it's interesting, isn't it? Because the market's so wide now. But how do you compete with what most people would suggest are the established brands in the market, or do you nearly not try to do? Do you nearly try to stick to what you're good at and let people discover you?
It's funny because all through my career, it's always been a case of when you're launching a new brand, whether it's Red Bull or Tiger or even Corona, there's always some brands that are bigger than you, and there's always going to be. This is not a new thing. However, the industry has changed a lot. When I first started out in the drinks industry, about 80+% of the business was on trade premise, so pubs. It's now less than 40, 44, 43%. It changes all the time. So the retailers have definitely become a higher priority and all that sort of stuff. Back in the day, you could sell brands with an ice bucket and a bit of bunting. Now it's all about pound signs, and the favours are not there like they used to be. It's a totally different industry, and the margins are a lot tighter. Supply chain is very difficult. Sort of ingredients. With the brewing and distilling industry, there's going to be a bump on malt, for instance, because we've had such rubbish weather this summer. Prices are going to go up, so it's always managing all those and the cost of power and all that sort of stuff. But the UK, what's happened especially is it's become a bit more consolidated. It's controlled a lot more by the big boys. You're seeing a race to the bottom line. We've had a very bad summer this year across lots of categories. Whiskey exports are down, beer sales down. There's a bit of a hangover from the Euros, so there's stock. So that's why you're seeing silly prices. I mean, I always take a good benchmark by looking at some of the spirit brands. Bailey's is always a good one to look at. Bailey's now a litre is cheaper than it was 20 years ago. and it's ridiculous price. I think I saw in Tesco last Christmas 10 quid a litre on
Yeah,
club card. Bonkers.
yeah,
And that brand now is 94% sold on promotion. So it's we've got to be very careful when
you end up self-fulfilling if you're not careful, don't you?
very much so. You've got to look at your pricing strategy, understand this is where, in my opinion, understanding your category management piece is so key, understanding where you can go, but sometimes just being bold as well. To me, when everything's on the down, sometimes that's the opportunity to really push a new brand, because that actually gives you exposure. Consumers look for something different. And at the moment, if you look at lab drinks, the long drinks, a lot of people are trading down from spirit drinks and going back onto lager, and
Yeah,
world lager is actually in growth. So in a way, it's almost like some of the stars have aligned quite nicely, and it's the right time for this brand in its 140-year history to really propel. We're already seeing that on an international level, like I say, with some major retailers taking us on in Australia and Canada and US. Same with Scandinavia. And this has all happened in the space of 11 months. So I've been here 11 months, so it's been quite
quite a year, wasn't it?
quite
Yeah,
quite
yeah,
busy.
yeah,
But do you know what? I'm very fortunate to have a fantastic team around me, and I have plenty of people who have no problem saying you're wrong. And I'm happy to listen to that. So that's the key thing. But like I say, coming back to that last piece, it is about really making sure that we have the right financials in place and right cash flow, and being very mindful of that.
yeah. No, it's interesting. Are you under? Sorry, we need. I've just looked at the time, but I just got an interesting question. Are you under any pressure to sort of widen the range and stretch the brand at all? Because there's a big kind of no-low element to a lot of the way people drink now. It's a combination of alcoholic and non-alcoholic drinks. Are you feeling that pressure, or is it something you're going to stick to the core offer with?
Basically, we have a very healthy NPD process here. It's one thing I've implemented. We have an interesting pipeline and the stuff that we have ready to go, but it's finding the right time to do that.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think most businesses need to always look at innovation. Need to also look, and that innovation doesn't necessarily mean about changing brand. That could be just pack format.
no,
That
yeah,
could be
exactly
looking
how
at,
it's delivered. Yeah,
yeah, or the platform it's on, whether it's e-coms, gifting, all those other elements, and thinking about, right, if I'm putting that F into, what return will it give me? So I think that's really key. So yeah, MPD I think should be a feature of most businesses. I think a lot of businesses don't think about it, don't give it the airtime it should have, because businesses are only healthy if they have stuff to flex with down the line. And like I say, it's not just about bringing a new brand in. That could be the format of that brand.
yeah, and I think as well, go back to what we talked about the history and the provenance of the brand. If you once you've got that sorted, it gives you the power and the ability to then go and take that into other areas, and people will believe you, isn't it? Because there is a lot of interest with today's consumer. They want to know what they're drinking and what it's saying about them. I think you've got that fantastically that you can bring alive again and beautifully surprise people, can't you?
Yeah, and consumers are a lot more open to learning stuff. You mustn't lie about what you do. I think transparency is key. And we are a genuine UK lager. So hopefully, if you can get through the Spanish ones, you can get to us on the
None
bar
of
very
which are made
soon.
in Spain nowadays.
So, but I think. Yeah, I think it's just always make sure that you recheck yourself, because the biggest challenge I think, especially in brewing and distilling, I said this earlier on, is complacency.
Mm.
And I think it doesn't hurt. I always, when I walk on site, I walk with a fresh pair of eyes and do a walk around the site and go, right, if I'm walking first time, have I missed something or
Yeah,
not seen something? And it's a good
yeah.
habit to get into, because then it becomes self-fulfilling, and you find you can, one, get to know more things that's going on, talk to more of these staff, but also, oh, we've got an issue here. But not being scared to be flexible, and like I say, come back full circle, listen to what people are saying, and not be scared to reach out. I mean, I'll give one example. We turn to the consulate in Australia and say, right, we're launching, we're doing this, really good story. Here's the articles from the newspapers in the 18th century, so on and so forth. We want you to start using us in UK events, with the government when you're doing anything like that. So the Ashes are on next year, and the Lions, they're going to use us. Why? Because we went. You need to use us. You ask the
You
question.
asked.
Yeah. What's the worst question? What's the worst going to happen? Someone's going to say no, and it's quite amazing how often we were not willing to ask the question.
Yeah. People are, because sometimes, what if he says no? Well, worse off.
And if they think you're a plonker for asking it, well, you're probably not going to see them again anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
That's the age thing, though. That's where you get a little bit tougher and you go, oh, well, I don't care.
You do, and then you realise that your friends call you a plonker anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, so that's it. We're all friends. Carry on. Right. I'm very mindful of your time, Jake. One last question then. And I think I probably know the answer to this. I like to ask this to everybody: is you've had some great jobs and some great things, especially this one. Have you had any regrets in taking on this role? Because it's quite a big job that you've taken, and it's obviously something that's very dear to the community. And has there been anything in hindsight you'd do differently now?
Honestly, at the moment, it's going to plan. I think I don't have regrets, because what's been quite good is because I've been given autonomy, and it's not because I'm a control freak. It's because in previous roles I've had, I've had certain bosses and stuff who are very either narcissistic or very, a boss, not a leader. And I think what that does is you realise that sometimes the frustration is when you have a strategy and it gets changed and there's no rationale for it and all that, and it's not talked about. Here, what's been nice is when I have a strategy, I run it through everybody and I get everyone's buy-in first before we implement it. I'm not running this business as you will do this or out. And if they do something wrong, I'll normally give everyone a second chance, because I think everybody deserves that. It comes back to the sage thing again, but I think it's, like I said, it's about selling alcohol. It's meant to be fun, and if it's not fun, why are we doing it? And we all struggle on that seesaw level. And I think one of the biggest challenges I often sit on with like organisations like Make UK, which is manufacturing and all that, and it's really good because we a lot of senior people together, and sometimes we're all finding the same issues. Sometimes we're all sort of in our own, not silo, but sometimes everyone's looking to you for the answer, and sometimes it's nothing wrong with saying I don't have the answer on this. We need to all pull our
Anybody
heads
solved
together.
this before? Can you help me?
And I don't think people, and when people say, "Oh, right, yeah, I can step up here," you've got to be very careful not to isolate yourself. And I think especially a lot of people run businesses, MDs, CEOs, and all that. A big thing that runs through is people isolate themselves and feel quite lonely because they don't, that it's communicating that in the right way. And that's something I've learned from some of the senior roles, like, suddenly going, oh God, it's just me, to now feeling that, I can be a bit more open to the team, but I'm lucky with the team I've got.
Brilliant. Fantastic piece of advice. I think it is good, and it's that reflection that makes it. James, thank you so much for your time. I've loved hearing the story, and we look forward to seeing Wrexham Lager in the four corners of the world, hey?
Yeah, and like I say, if you haven't tried Wrexham Lager yet, well, we can go online, and if you haven't tried it, why not? I think you might be surprised.
We'll do a podcast offer.
Yeah, why not? I'm more than happy to do that.
Right, watch this space. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Okay, pleasure.